Well, thank you very much, Dan. It's my pleasure to start off this panel talking about recruiting the executive team. I think Millie, we can go to the next slide. A little bit about me.
Millie, can you put it in full screen mode? Thank you. Good.
Yeah, this is a little background on me. I was actually the chair of ENET for 10 years. And, at that time and really for the first 20 years of my legal practice, I was very focused on startup companies. In 2019, Millie succeeded me. She's been doing a fantastic job. But really over the last 5 years, my focus has been much more representing executives. And even though I represent executives and their stock, their options, employment terms, et cetera, there are occasions where companies call me up and they're having trouble recruiting somebody, and they want me to use my skills to help them, to make them attractive to recruit. And so I've got a bunch of techniques, and I'm going to share those techniques with you tonight for how the company recruits. Okay, we can go to the next slide, Millie. Get the next one up here if we could.
Whoops. Hold on.
Beautiful. Okay, now I got two sets of slides really. The first one is about team building on a shoestring, and then going from that to building a firm foundation. Those are the two aspects that I'm going to cover tonight. Building on a shoestring is thinking out of a box, and I've got a couple of stories that I start with talking about that. The first is a presentation that I wouldn't call them a rival group, but it's another startup group. It's the MIT Enterprise Forum. Many years ago, I went to an MIT Enterprise Forum in this huge room at MIT called 10250. It's like 250 people. There's somebody speaking about building a team, building a company, and I thought I'd be smart and I would ask him because I figured he'd talk about equity. So I said, you talk about the importance of building an A team and how the A team was so important to your company. Well, you're a startup company. Okay, you're a funded startup, but how were you able to recruit that team? He said, it was simple. This is our technique. We would find out what these executives were making, and we'd pay them 40% more. And we got every one of the ones we wanted. If you got that kind of money, they had $100 million. If your startup doesn't have $100 million, how are you going to recruit? What if you not only can't pay them 40% more? What if you're asking somebody to take a cut and pay, and they got a secure job? And it's not easy. And that leads to the next example that I'm going to give, and that is this slide here with two figures from cinematic history 50 years ago. This is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Robert Redford and Paul Newman. And in that movie, they were outlaws, and they had such a reputation that an all-star team of sheriffs was set to get them. And they chased them all through the territory. And finally, they were cornered. And they were in this ravine with this huge drop to the water. And the Paul Newman character, Butch Cassidy, says, we got to jump. We got to jump. We're cornered. And Sundance, he won't jump. He won't jump. You got to jump. No, we can't jump. Why won't you jump? Well, I can't swim. You can't swim. The fall will kill you. And then they jump over. Shit, and they survive. But the idea is, when you don't have the money and you got to recruit on a shoestring, don't hold back. Don't say, oh, I can't swim. Because the idea is, if you don't get that A team, your company's going to fail anyway. So use everything in your toolbox, within reason, to recruit that A team. And don't worry, that you're doing this or that, like Sundance is. Take the jump because you got to recruit them. Okay, so what do you do to recruit these people? We move to the next slide. Okay, the first slide here, really talks about, the barriers that you face. You can't offer competitive salary. You don't have an established place to market, not a recognized name. You got a credibility challenge. it's tough to get people to take this risk. These are the challenges you face. Let's move to the next slide. So how do we get them to do it? Okay, so what you try to do is you try to use early stage mode as your advantage. It's very important to be able to tell the story. We had a very good story tonight about seaweed. We get wonderful stories with the E-minute. You got to be able to do that E-minute pitch. You got to be able to do that 90-second pitch and tell a compelling story, because the story is going to recruit people. You also need to show flexibility, and you're talking about people getting in on the ground floor and to strike gold. I mean, I like to think about American history. I mean, 1848, 1849, they discovered gold in California. You had bankers, you had lawyers, you had all accountants. They left everything and crossed the country because they thought that they were going to pan for gold, and you have to convince people that you've got the Klondike or you've got, the California gold rush, and this is their chance to strike gold. The other thing too is you can offer remote work, you can meet individual needs, things that the big companies, that are so constricted and so regulated that you can be more nimble. And these are your advantages. The other thing you can do is there's a whole toolbox of equity that you can use. There's restricted shares. There's this thing called QSBS that hopefully in the Q&A I may get into more. There's restricted stock, stock units, RSUs, performance stock units. There's a whole host of equity tools that you can use, as part of your recruitment effort. Next slide, Billy. This is a little thing here. Think about success in different aspects. So let's move on to the next one. Okay, and then you could also use the tax law. This is a very hard concept to understand. Nobody considers the IRS. Nobody considers the tax law as your friend. But believe it or not, it can be your friend, because there actually are provisions in the tax code that help startup companies. First, to get capital gains, and then even to get no tax. And that's, again, something that hopefully I'll get into in the Q&A. There's tax deferral, protection of your gains to the future, so that there's a lot of opportunities with tax laws, to aid you as a startup. And then once again, this concept of striking gold, that you're building up this value, that you're starting on the ground floor and building up. And this can give you an advantage in recruitment. Next slide, Millie. Also, compensation terms. You can offer a more varied signing bonus. Of course, the big company, they're going to offer them 50 or 100,000. You don't have that money. But what you could do is you can offer, an equity arrangement. Very often what I use is typical vesting is a 4-year vest. So we, to an attractive candidate, we'll say, listen, we tell you what, we'll vest 10% as your sign-up bonus. And so the person gets equity from day one. And if they're seeking to join you because of that potential to strike gold, the fact that you're willing to vest some of it right up front, that can be a very useful hiring tool. There's also, things, loans using promissory notes to buy stock. Have this thing called 120% of applicable federal rate, which, you can get a loan even today at just 3% that the IRS will recognize, so that it can be very favorable terms to either pay the taxes or to get the stock. And then, how you do the performance bonus. These are different ways to do it. And then the other thing you can do too, to make it enticing, is to offer more favorable employment terms. Executives who are used to big companies, they're used to the big company mentality. And big companies have big law firms, and big law firms have to prove, and I know this sounds sexist, but they got to prove their manhood. You know, whether it's a man or a woman lawyer, they got to prove their manhood. They got to show how tough they are. And every big company lawyer, they have this mentality that they live in 1920 Kentucky or West Virginia. These are the coal fields. Which side are you on? Are you for management and owners? Or are you for labor? It can only be on one side. And they give these terms that basically take no prisoners. Really tough terms. Often terms that make no sense. See, and if you can offer more favorable terms, then, you know, terms to allow an executive to continue to do some consulting on the side, to give more benefits, to give termination provisions that are much fairer, to give non-competes, restricted covenants that are actually targeted so that a person can get a job afterwards. These things will be revolutionary to executives and, could help you in recruitment. Okay, so we're going to move on. We're going to move to the next part of my presentation. Okay, and here the example is and again, I've used this presentation in the past. I've certainly done a lot of updating for this presentation tonight, but I first did it, back in the early 2000s with the early Super Bowls. So this is Bill Belichick, who's of course eternal. I mean, he'll probably be here 20 years from now, but Scott Pioli is long ago. And so there they are with the Super Bowl. But the slogan that I use for the second part, building the foundation, firm foundation, is appear generous, demand value. And this is something that is really a Patriots trademark, that they always try to buy low and sell high, get the value out of the person. And the next series of slides is going to be talking about that. On the one hand, you gotta go for broke and offer what you can, but on the other hand, you can't give away everything. And so there's what you want to do is you want to make sure that you get value back, for what you give away. Okay, so move on to the next one, Billy. Okay, so the first one is the vesting arrangements. This is very important because what you want to do is you want to make sure that the person makes a contribution, and that if they don't, if they're going to leave you after 6 months, they're going to leave you after a year, it's very tough to get that stock back. So, you got to make sure that you have protections for yourself. You also, want provisions that will allow you, if they leave, that you got the equity, to hire a replacement. So this is important. Let's move on to the next one, Billy. Okay, and this is a cute slide, where the guy's trying to recruit, and here, they're so tough on everything. It's amazing why there's no loyalty. Cute slide. Let's continue. Okay, and then you want to, as I said, calibrate your vesting, your stock rights, so that this way, you make it attractive by offering liquidity, offering a cash exit, durability of stock options that you might offer some extended exercise. Now, with stock options, almost every stock option that's issued says that if you leave that company, you got to terminate. You lose the option 90 days after you terminate employment. And that's a cruddy thing to employees. What if the stock is illiquid and there's a strike price that you got to pay? What if it's underwater? I mean, you put in 2-3 years and you got stock options worth nothing. And this is where you try to make it more enticing by saying, you know what, if you put in the time with this company, we'll give you extended exercise. We'll give you 2 years after you terminate employment to exercise that option. And and there's different tricks you can do that way. And this can be very attractive to an employee who doesn't see it with a big company. They don't offer that kind of flexibility. And then also, acceleration on success events. There's a lot of acceleration terms that will exclude an IPO. We'll have provisions to say you don't get acceleration until, there's two events that occur. You've got to be terminated as well. Be generous. If a person is helpful to you to get a success of equity, that's the goddamn equity. Treat them like an investor. Treat them like somebody who contributed. They shouldn't have to pass new hurdles. And it's amazing how many companies will set up these new hurdles, which I consider self-defeating because it's not going to recruit the person. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Now, these are a couple of important provisions, a part of appear generous demand value. Make sure that particularly with technical people, with CTOs, CIOs, that you get an assignment of inventions. The company needs to own its own assets. And if you have people who have not assigned things over, that can be a problem with investing, down the road. So you need that in terms of, non-solicitation, non-disclosure. I mean, you want that. You don't want them raiding the employees. You don't want them raiding customers. But on the other hand, it can be targeted. If somebody, leaves the company voluntarily, they ought to be able to get them. So anyway, that's the next slide. Then we got one more. I don't know how we're doing on time. Hopefully I'm almost.
You have about 5 minutes.
Oh, I have 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, well.
So we can put in a question.
Okay, you can put it in a question, sure. Okay, so then finally, we get the issue of allocating equity, and here there's a certain discipline to dividing up the pie. You only got 100% of the stock, and so I tell people, be careful. Make sure you save seats at the table. There may be other people that you're recruiting down the road. You got to make sure you got enough equity for them. Also, there's big temptation to be very fair. Everybody gets 33%. Resist the temptation. Focus on the value to the company. If the biggest value is money and somebody in the founding group brings money, fine. If it's technology, or if it's the ability to penetrate the market, whatever is the most value, that's what should command the equity. But on the other hand, don't make the mistake of giving them that equity and not vesting it. I've had circumstances where big names have been recruited to the company, and those big names didn't do anything, and yet they're sitting with a block of stock. That's no good. And then finally, you get the issue of dilution. Investors typically have anti-dilution protections, but people that you're recruiting can get them too. We don't call them anti-dilution; we call them true-up adjustments. And for the right executive, you can offer them a true-up adjustment. You can say, "Listen, we are recruiting you because we got a big push, for our Series A, and we're offering you 2% of the company, and we will give you a true-up adjustment. You come in now, you roll up your sleeves, you help us get that Series A, and when we get it, we will true up your stock so that you keep that same 2%." And you could say, you can make an adjustment through a liquidity event. You can make it through a period of time. All of that's possible. But it's typically the investors who have this, and of course, this is what you got to watch out for, in your negotiations, because they get participating preferred, they get minority protections. The executives don't get that. So anyway, so that's what I got, and again, I'll be happy to answer questions later. I think we can do the questions later. You have my questions, Ken?
I do.
Good.